Hello, everyone who's joined us, and we're going to, thanks, Caroline, for starting the recording. So it's Catherine here from DKIT and AHECS Executive Director, and delighted to be able to introduce our Lunch and Learn today, which is focusing on the national initiative NTutor. I suppose some of us who are involved as campuses in the NTutor project and initiative would be very aware of the name, but it's great to have a focus here today. So the NTutor is a national project, as I say, and it's focusing on innovative collaboration across the technological higher education sector, looking at transforming student experience. It's made up of 7 higher education partners, 6 themes and 3 work streams. And today, representing NTutor and MTU, we're delighted to be welcome to be joined by Niamh Foley, who is lecturer and academic developer for NTutor. Niamh is part of the MTU academic development group that is working to develop guidelines to integrate the 6 NTutor thematic areas into curriculum development. And her specific focus is on employability, which again links in with ourselves here in AHECS. Alongside Aoife, we have our colleague Niamh, we have our colleague Aoife Kelleher, and Aoife is Student Empowerment Coordinator with NTutor in MTU. Aoife has worked in student services and student societies for 10 years, has an MA in Human Resource Management from MTU, and her role in NTutor is to support staff and students in running the employability initiatives, and has been part of the NTutor project implementation team. So fantastic to have both Niamh and Aoife along with us today. Just a reminder to everybody, if they can, that we'd ask you to keep your mics on mute, and I'll hand over now to Niamh and Aoife. We'll have time at the end for Q&A or for any comments on the session, and just also to remind everybody that this is a recorded session, including the Q&A session today. Okay, so I'll hand over to Niamh and Aoife, and thanks for joining us, everybody.
Lovely. Thank you, Catherine. Thanks so much for the introduction. It's great to get an opportunity to speak with everyone today. I think moving from student services and into NTutor, it's given me a great opportunity to, I suppose, speak to different colleagues across supports and services in a lot of the universities and colleges. So it's always great to kind of stop and share just our insights from this year, and also I'm looking forward to the opportunity to listen to your perspectives in how you think this is integrated, or perhaps how you think what we can take from the NTutor, and how it might integrate into your roles within your universities and institutes also. So I'll just start sharing my screen here, and just as today will work, to give you an outline on it. So we'll go from I suppose I'll just give a brief introduction to NTutor, just to make sure. I'm very aware that we have people in the room that perhaps may not be aware of the initiative, because it is specific to the technical universities and some partners as well. And then Niamh will kind of really get into the work and her insights into the employability and the curriculum and how that might look. I'll then share some experiences that I've seen as Student Empowerment Coordinator of employability in action through the year, and then Niamh will bring us towards the questions and answers just towards the end then. So as we're looking at NTutor, just to give an idea of where it is, so it's the National Technological University Transformation for Recovery and Resilience. So I suppose what that means then is it's a project that's been EU funded, so it's funding that has come from outside Ireland, but it was specifically in response to the COVID, and looking to see what the benefits that we can take from that, and how we transform so quickly in such a short time period, perhaps using that as an opportunity to transform how we look at going forward also as well. It's funded by the European Union, but there's also HEA support to there, and it's coordinated through TIA, so they're key partners and supporters in it. A particular part about it is that it has been across a number of partners, and they're listed just towards the bottom of it there. So there's been a national drive, but there's been local action, which has been fantastic in it. To give an idea just of the guidance, the government and the timescales of it, so it has been running since June 2022, but we really saw it in action from this academic year that is just closing off, and it'll run to the end of 2024. So that's the timescale of it that it has been operating on, and there are further resources if you want to look in to see what are the projects or what are the initiatives that have been running. There's certainly an opportunity to do that from the website that's available there. Just to let you know as well, we'll be sharing these slides after, so just for clicking on and for taking notes, we'll share that information after. So just make whatever notes that you think will be important for yourself to reference back. As Katrin mentioned, there's the 6 themes on it. Again, so that you've got that sense of collaboration across universities and across partners, that has been very helpful. But also looking at it from a broader perspective, not just through one's lens, has been really helpful as well, because I suppose when you're looking at transformation, it's important that for the Tutor initiative anyway, it has been great that it's brought a broader perspective to it, that we're not just kind of approaching it and saying, look, this is one area that we want to focus on. There's actually, like anything that you look at, it's been almost impossible to look at it in isolation. It's been good that we've been looking at it and look, here are the 6 broad themes. And when we're looking at something, it's can we make focus on where we want to make an improvement, but also it has an effect. And I think that's really important when you're working within the university environment, I suppose, to note, like we're all of us are working within institutes of change. There's so much change that's going on there all the time. And sometimes it can seem like a real challenge. It can be difficult. We're kind of, you feel like you're trying to catch up to things all the time. You feel like you're behind, which can be very frustrating. But there's a natural rollover of students. I mean, there's been a huge change in technology and in trends recently in particular as well. They've been hugely challenging. I mean, even natural turnover of staff that are coming in and out of different areas. I suppose it's just important to acknowledge that we do work in a challenging environment, and sometimes it can be difficult to stay up with these. And furthermore, even from my experience in student services, how you take that then and offer it as a support or offer it as a service to students and staff is really difficult and challenging in what you can offer to the students as a support. So that's just a kind of a brief introduction to the Tutor project and how it's been running. I'll hand over now to Niamh, who's going to take you further information and about the curriculum in particular.
Well, thanks, Aoife. So I suppose good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the invite to be able to share, I suppose, the insights that I've kind of been looking into with the team on curriculum framework. So I suppose one of the main roles that we're kind of looking at is trying to the development of, staff toolkits for each team in a way that staff can kind of implement the changes. So I suppose we're trying to capture best practice, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to define what we're actually doing and how we do it, because there's so many best practices out there, and it's, I suppose, to try to collaborate them and develop a shared pack of resources. And I suppose we're also working on, self-reflective tools for, programmatic review, new program development, and even looking at our own modules and programs, and how we develop, I suppose, these two teams into our curricula. And I suppose, there's a reflective piece then where you will be able to kind of, I suppose, look at where you find yourself on a scale, and I suppose a toolkit then to help you to progress and I suppose move forward as we capture them teams as we move forward. So just the next slide, Aoife, please. So I suppose just looking at employability and definition, employability, I suppose, lacks a universally accepted definition. And I suppose there's just a number of initiatives and employability definitions out there. But again, a lot of them, Williams there looks at contested, you have interpretation, we have perceptions. So I suppose when we look at it, we need to ensure we have the same definition and the same discussion, with our institutes, our employers, our students, our stakeholders, because again, I suppose the employability is a multifaceted term, and I suppose we just have to have an awareness of that. So while I was looking at the curriculum framework, the employability definition, just the next slide, Aoife, please, that I looked at, I suppose, was from the point of view of advanced HE. And I suppose I was looking at it in the context of higher education. And I suppose it's looking at, you know, students have the knowledge set, the skills, the experiences to be successful in their future, whether that be employment, creation, further study or beyond. And I suppose another definition I was kind of looking on that some of you might be familiar with is York of 2006, where he was looking at skills, understandings and personal attributes, but was kind of looking at it from a point of view of to gain employment. So, you know, we want to open it up because it is a creation, you know, is it further study, or, you know, what do our students and our graduates want to look at from that point of view. So then just the next slide, I suppose, next few slides are going to take us through, I suppose, some of the models of and for employability. And you might be familiar with this one below, and I suppose it just recognises the dynamic and ever-changing nature of the work environment and the process. So I suppose the dots kind of stand for, you know, the decisions. What decision-making skills have our students learned now? And I suppose the opportunities, you know, what opportunities are they aware of? You know, what have they explored? What have they researched? And looking at the transitions then, you know, from what skills do they have for making these successful transitions? So what type of jobs are they looking for? What type of jobs are they applying for? And then I suppose the self, you know, where are they now? And what am I looking at? So the next model there then, just the next slide, Aoife, thank you, is the USEM Night in York 2004. So again, I suppose I find this one, when I looked at it, it's a very academic model, and it's a hard one to implement, to put it into the curricula, because I suppose we don't want to kind of add employability. We want kind of a natural framework, so it's kind of surface there. You know, we're doing a lot of it, but it's just to pull out that understanding from students' point of view. So it's still a good model because, again, you know, you can look at the skills, you can look at the efficacy, you can look at, you know, subject understanding, and then you can look at the mega cognition. But again, I just found, you know, in what we were looking at, it was a difficult one. And then moving on to the next model was Bridgestock, an Australian one. And I suppose this one has moved up now. They're working on graduate employability point 4. But again, the same, looking at the connectiveness, looking at our pedagogy, how do we get that across to our students, and then looking at the enabling strategies. So again, I suppose, where's that self-assessment? Where is that personal review? And I suppose it's the commitment to the principles of connectedness, and I suppose looking at that interchange between partnerships and listening to and meeting with stakeholder needs. And I suppose it's just kind of, how do we look at that idea and that occupational information, I suppose, together really is what we're looking at. And then the last model that I kind of looked at was the career edge model of employability. And again, one that you might be familiar with Lorraine Darkey-Poole and Peter Swell. And, you know, I think this is a good model, and, you know, it suggests that, you know, if we provide students with opportunities for them to kind of access and develop the lower tier here by reflecting and evaluating on their experiences, it moves up the chain. So, you know, looking at career development learning, you know, how do our students explain, you know, potential employers, you know, what achievements have they gained? How will it be of benefit to them? You know, and one that kind of, I suppose, is an overarching term that's coming up, that's coming back to me is, I suppose, where we're looking at is, you know, there's a big transition to AI, sustainability. So, you know, the SDGs and the ESGs, and, you know, students are having the knowledge, but can they actually apply it to the environment that they want to push into, the employment? So how do they kind of look at it? I suppose then as well, the generic skills, their communication, their literacy, you know, their willingness to learn, their attention to detail. And I suppose then as well, emotional intelligence, the recognition of their own feelings and those to motivate others, and, you know, their relationship within the team, and then their life experiences as well, I suppose, is important. So how do we knit those 5, you know, to move up the ladder to that self-esteem, self-confidence, self-efficacy? And I suppose, what kind of reflection and evaluation do we utilise to deliver to our students going forward, I suppose, really? So then I suppose that moves on to embedding employability on the next slide. And I suppose this is where I'm saying, you know, it's not always about trying to add employability into our programs. You know, it's looking at how we approach our subject. So, you know, I suppose there has been a lot, like I was saying, on sustainability. We're picking out SDGs, we're pulling out the ESGs, we're pulling out the different thematic themes that we have. So again, I suppose what we actually find is a lot of these elements can already be in our programs, but maybe our students aren't actually differentiating the knowledge, and the link to employability is there. And, you know, I suppose one important thing that we have to look at when we talk about employability as well is the context, our geographical location, you know, our student retention patterns, you know, and all those variables for local industry, how that influences embedding, you know, into the curricula. So again, you know, looking at, I suppose, how we liaise with industry, you know, work-based learning, you know, I suppose looking at projects, collaborations, really, I suppose, is what we're looking at there. So then I suppose as well, you know, how do we do that on the next slide? So, you know, it's important, I suppose, how do we frame a module in a skills context? So, you know, if we're doing a project, why are we doing the project? Do we, you know, ask the questions, and are we incorporating those skills and utilizing, you know, reflective activities for our students so that they're actually linking what they learn to the skills, to the environment section that they want to, I suppose, make a career around? And, you know, the discussion then on, you know, career. So, you know, what is a career, or, you know, what can a career be, or what should a career be? You know, 3 very, I suppose, different and interchangeable. And I suppose it's just important as well, as we kind of embed employability into our programs, that we develop our students' knowledge of, you know, industry, and that they can find an affinity towards the industry that's, you know, of interest to them. And then I suppose that takes us forward to the next slide, where it's looking at, you know, developing the skills of our learners. So, you know, from that point of view, I suppose, looking at personal development planning, you know, and employability, because there's a strong link between the two, between the personal development planning and employability. So, you know, are our learners able to plan, record, reflect upon their experiences in a way that actually develops their employment-related skills and their self-awareness? And can our learners, you know, understand how their transferable skills can be applied in new settings and for future, you know, personal development? So, you know, things like, you know, supporting a LinkedIn profile, you know, group work, you know, and I suppose career service signposting is so important, you know, ensuring and encouraging students to liaise with the career section of their institutions, you know, is very, very important, because there's some great work that's going on, you know, within that, and, you know, collaborations that Aoife will talk about later on with, you know, fellowships, student leaders. So, you know, I suppose that's an important thing. So on the next slide then, you know, as academics, and I suppose trying to empower students, looking at, you know, the power of questioning and assignment development, looking at assignments, you know, what skills, attributes have you developed? So asking the learners, you know, so you might have a reflective piece on what they've written. So, you know, what have they learned? What learning outcomes, what skills and attributes can they highlight that they can bring to employment and that they can develop forward? and what's their performance or their contribution to group learning. And I think that's an important part to look at as well. So the next slide then, I suppose, is the majority of courses and programs have some element of work-based learning, work placement, work experience. So again, I suppose trying to link how knowledge can be applied in the chosen field. So, if we take, mathematics, if we're looking at maths, students are kind of going, I don't like it, I don't want to do it. But again, I suppose building that employability, where can you see a use for it? So, from electrical theory or hydraulic theory or soils, there's quite a lot, I suppose. So getting the student to stop and think and look at what skills they're developing and what they're getting out of projects and dissertations and capstone projects to move their work, I suppose, forward is important. So I suppose there's a lot of toolkits for embedding employability. So like, the first point of call, they have the career service, strong connections with alumni. Are we bringing in guest lecturers? Are we bringing in industry? What types of work integrated learning are we looking at? Is it problem solving? Is it simulated? Is it scenario based? Is it capstone? And I suppose that collaboration is, essential for embedding, because I suppose as we've seen over the last while, the likes of sustainability, artificial intelligence, the renewable energy sector are all new skill sets. So again, I suppose, having a checklist, and I suppose that's what we're trying to develop as a curriculum framework team in MTU, is to see how our programs and how our modules look up to that, and where we can see shortfalls or new areas that we can actually link in and have a toolkit to help programs to progress going forward. So Aoife, I'll hand back to you.
It's great, thanks, Niamh. So I suppose, looking back on the year that I've seen with, in particular this academic year within TUTOR, so they would have put out a call for projects that would focus on improving each of the thematic areas of TUTOR. And this presentation has given me an opportunity really to kind of really hone in on the ones that I felt impacted employability. And it was interesting to see the different range in how it was impacted and why it was impacted. So I'll just kind of share some of those ideas with you, and it might be an opportunity for you to maybe take something new on in your own university or institute, or perhaps kind of just acknowledge actually maybe that's something that we should be sharing out, that you might have a good idea also to share in it. And that's been a key part of the TUTOR process actually, is that collaboration between, and good practices and sharing of good practices and sharing of ideas has been really helpful. So the first one, there was kind of three key areas I want to look at, is about talking, action and tools. So that idea of creating a culture of employability, I think, was extremely important in, it's like sometimes the careers, and my experience from student services, careers can feel like it's that service or that support that's just to the side. But really, I suppose it's about really trying to get employability across into each of the areas of the department, so that everybody's taking a responsibility, no more so than the students themselves feeling that they have an active role in their own employability information and upskilling. But the thing that struck me in particular was that just one size does not fit all. So we speak about employability very broadly, but actually when you drill down into it, how that transfers to the type of supports and services that you might offer, it really depends on the student, and then the user is always at the heart of it. And there's so many varying aspects and factors that need to be taken into consideration as to the individual's own level of skills. Might be a novice, might be new, they might be looking for a higher level to actually enhance their skills further, that they've got the basics. They're depending on the different area of course and subjects that they're relating to. It might be a very technical skill. It might be actually a very soft type skill that they want to improve on. but that I suppose that there isn't a one single answer to this that's going to capture it all. But that is important to acknowledge, is that you need to leave that space then for a variety of ideas to come through, and projects, and that's what the tutor has been able to do in some of the examples that you've seen here. Also, that idea of, I think it's extremely important to focus on the end user is really important. So keeping your ear to the ground, and that idea of it's changing all the time. So that is constant change in what we need to listen to and what we need to understand is what people are looking for. But I think one of the key questions that I can kind of see across all of it, and perhaps it isn't asked enough really, is about just what is motivating students to engage. I think is a real key point, I suppose, that will keep you current and keep you in knowledge of what is important. Because I think we all just assume that students want to be employable, and we all just assume, but actually I think asking that question of, and being able to answer as to why they should be interested in investing in their employability and upskilling is really important. And particularly when you look at motivation, you talk about intrinsic and extrinsic, and there are changing in generations, and the students that are coming through as undergraduates, whereas mature students, the broader accessibility of student that we're bringing into third level, that's extremely important. And just even the experience of undergrad students that are coming through from secondary school levels or from PLCs, for example. Previously, I suppose the extrinsic motivators, what do you mean, that transactional sense of you're going to have a job and you're going to get paid for that job, and that'll be enough, and that's enough for you to try and improve your career. But I think more so in my experience from students, particularly through societies, is that the students are very motivated, but intrinsically about a sense of challenge, and the importance of belonging in a space is really important to them. That they're given the space to feel that they can express themselves, that they can share their values, that they can build on their values, so that they can feel as contributors. And I think this also comes into employability, because this is what they're also expecting from the organizations or the spaces that we are asking them to move into. And I think that's feeding back into third level also as well. I observe various student roles that we'd be paying students, for example, across our own university and MTU, and I'm sure you would have something similar in your own institutes as well. That idea of bringing students in and paying them for undertaking roles. But more and more I see students kind of weighing up as to whether I'd like to go into that role, and is that the particular type of role that I want to be part of, and why, if I am part of that role, what will I get out of it, and also how will I be able to express myself and my interests. So I think there's something in looking at the motivation for students, for why they should engage in upskilling themselves, and what motivates them to undertake those opportunities. Because more and more then we're looking at, for example, that the resources are there. It's the difficulty actually is engaging the students in the process of it. I just want to highlight one key project that would have been the fellowship projects this year as an example. So this is a project that was looking essentially at e-portfolios. So the challenge for them, they are in a sports coach course. So the difficulty for them with the CV-based, the paper-based CVs, is that it didn't really capture their skills, it didn't capture themselves, their expressions. So they wanted somewhere where they could display them, and that they could bring these to work placement was the key goal of this, was that when their third years are going out in work placement, then instead of sharing a paper-based CV, that they would be able to share a link for a portfolio. And on that, it's a modern, digitalized, it's personalized, it's about that individual, but also that they can share different media. So that was extremely important. So I've picked this project in particular because it was led by 2 students. So the students took this on as something that they identified as a problem, and something that they were invested in improving. And speaking with them, and now in reflection, you really get that sense of confidence of that they changed something, that now they've been able to bring it, and in particular in that they were able to bring it back to the younger classes, the first and second years within their course as well. That they've affected change within their community was really important to them. So they chose how they did it. They delivered the peer-to-peer workshops. and they could see the importance of offering step-by-step instructions for students. That idea of just putting something up online or something that's a support that is there for students to engage with, it's there, but really you need those resources to go and bring those students to the space and walk them through it is extremely important. And there's a number of really good employability tools out there at the moment. And I think that I can see that there's the gap between it's there and it's available for the students to avail of. But now how do you bring them into it and how do you engage them with it? And I guess the question I want to ask here is as we move forward in looking at bringing employability into the curriculum, like where does the responsibility of that lie? And maybe this peer-to-peer delivery is something that should be considered. It's maybe something that could be explored a little bit more, and it might be the way of empowering students within their own groups, but at the same time, you're getting the important message out. They're getting an opportunity to share their message, and they're in these ambassador type roles, being advocates or being ambassadors for employability. So this project, I think, just was a good example of that, and it just seemed to work well. And I know through my work with societies as well, is like the key for something, sometimes like when you're looking at something as broad as employability, it can be very overwhelming to figure out. Like I said, it's not one size fits all. So you're trying to figure out how this one answer can kind of fix everything. And sometimes actually it's about going into the different groups and going into the smaller cohorts and testing a process or testing something within those cohorts. And if that works well, then you're creating something smaller that actually can just duplicate across a university or across a community. That perhaps maybe that's an approach when you're trying to be a bit flexible and adaptable when you're rolling it out. The third thing I want to talk about just briefly is just the concept of the digital backpack that in TUTOR has rolled out between all the partners. So if you're within an in TUTOR partner, this is something that you can log on to now, all staff and all students. So I've put the link there for you to log on to. Unfortunately, it isn't nationwide, but it certainly has the potential for it. So the digital backpack is essentially online courses that have been developed by higher education for higher education. So I suppose that's the unique area that they're in. So I'm sure you'd have experience of LinkedIn Learning and different video-based platforms. What they've developed in the backpack is something by HE for HE, which I think is important sometimes when you're looking at the subjects and the contents of videos. Sometimes they just don't quite hit the mark. So they have a number, it's a pilot project, so they're rolling it out. But the idea is that any student and any of the partners can log in, undertake the course. They range and varies from 2 to 3 hours, but it's flexible learning, it's in their own time. And at the end of the course, that they'll be issued with a digital badge to acknowledge the course completion. Also, so it covers broad areas, so you can see there's academic integrity. But then, if you're perhaps sometimes if you're in an engineering course, if you're in a science course and you don't get the opportunity to learn about the likes of civic engagement or gender-based violence, this might be an opportunity for students, if they have a particular interest in something, to, I suppose, further study it in their own time. So again, and just to touch back on culture before I pass it back on to you there, Niamh, it's just that idea, like how do you affect the culture of something? Sometimes you need to, it's there for them to offer, but it's important that I suppose that message of engagement has to come across from staff, it has to come across from the service provider, but also the peers and the students, I think, are an important factor in this as well that can be used.
So I suppose just following on from Aoife then, I suppose looking at what employers are looking for, and I suppose it's that professional competence, but it's also, there's a big part of employability around global awareness now, because I suppose in the recognition of the growth and of diversity and internationalism, students need to be exposed to this. They need to, I suppose, develop their understanding and their appreciation, and the diverse international cultures as well, I suppose, is important, and their professional ethics as well, when we're looking at that. And just the next slide shows, what are the in-demand skills of 2025. And I suppose where's kind of looking back to, it's dealing that the top 10 skills of 2025, and it's just looking at the job landscape. So this is taken from the World Economic Forum, their Future of Work report of 2023. And I suppose it's just dividing down, I suppose, the top 4 skills, and they're kind of looking at, you know, the problem solving, the self-management, working with people, and looking at technology use and development. And I suppose where we're looking at, you know, where we're located in the geographical area, you know, we have to look at, again, you know, what are the growing demands, you know, what's kind of decreasing. And I suppose we're looking at, you know, technology, digitization, sustainability, you know, all important factors that we have to build in for employability. And I suppose to the emerging and the self-management and utilising, I suppose, the supports that are available to us from that point of view. And then in conclusion, I suppose it's just to look at that there are many challenges, I suppose, facing us as educators, facing the labour market, and I suppose knitting and collaborating and creating those active linkages, I suppose, is very, very important. And I suppose that all stakeholders understand the concept of employability, because employability is a lifelong issue, and its adaptability to the demands of a changing world is key. And I suppose we have to aim then to make sure that employability is everybody's business. And again, you know, that there's increased flexibility and ownership at programme levels as well, to ensure that the work is a feature of, you know, learning and teaching, and that we're engaging students, but we're also engaging industry. And we're finding that systematic approach and that unified approach at, you know, our institutional and organisational levels. So thank you very much. If there's any questions, Aoife and myself will be happy to take any.
That's great. Thanks so much, Niamh and Aoife, for a really fantastic overview of the Tutor project in connection to your own experiences as an MTU under the theme of employability. And I suppose as maybe just to say to people, you can put your questions into the chat or put your hand up or shout. We'll take any option. But I suppose that really the themes that are coming across to me, and I'm one of the HEIs, which is part of that the Tutor I suppose partnership or collaboration. And I suppose that idea of some of the themes that have been emerging here today would be very familiar to those of us who are careers practitioners, those of us who are placement practitioners across the spectrum. From your models that many of us either have used or moved on from DOTS to Career Edge, to looking at working, I suppose, in collaboration with academics, maybe primarily needs, or maybe a question there from me in relation to that idea of, you know, as careers and placement practitioners, we are aware that getting careers conversation employability into the classroom is key, and how we do that in terms of engaging with that. And as a lecturer yourself, and I suppose as maybe influencing others within your campus around this, how has the project so far maybe helped you with that partnership that we can do as careers and placement practitioners with academics?
I suppose, yeah, it's key, because again, you know, employability has to be everybody's business. And from that point of view, I suppose we're just looking at, you know, that surfacing, that it's not always adding, that it's there, but it actually has to be kind of spoken out, that, you know, it can be just glossed over and people don't actually react to it. But I mean, you know, it's like, you know, the career services and the career supports and the employability supports there, it's key to bring those and to liaise with the organisations. Like MTU has an EDGE programme, you know, there's the Careers Connect, there's the platform, there's ePortfolio, you know, and it's, you know, maybe as an academic, I wouldn't have been aware of all those, you know, so I would have been closed off to them. And that's why, you know, this collaboration and engagement, and I suppose this tool that we're looking at from a reflective practice and, you know, a questionnaire, I suppose, for the want of a better word, to look at how that skill set and, you know, how your reflections are kind of looking at and how can you improve the curriculum. But again, collaboration with all sectors, you know, is so important in that, to help focus that.
Yeah, no, that's great, Niamh. I suppose I am interested to hear how that tool develops in terms of how you measure the embedding employability within the curriculum, how that is done in an easy way alongside program development, programmatic review, those types of things, I think is a really important development, and how that's shared across the sector. I'm just looking at some comments coming through in and mostly just a thank you for an informative presentation. There's been some pickup on the digital backpack and that idea that it sounds great. And if there's any appetite or for that digital backpack to sort of be open source, so it goes beyond that of the TU or HEI sector and the IT sector.
Yeah, so I'll take that, Catherine. Yeah, it's at the moment it's in pilot stage, so that's why it is within the TUTOR project partners. But I think that the task for us is to prove that it can work and should work, and that this is something that there is student demand for. I think across higher education, it's important to prove that there's a need for something before you can roll it out across everybody, because there's so much that needs to be coordinated between systems and logins and things like that. Like, that's something that we've found challenging this year, even across the 7 partners involved. That getting that seamless sign-on, and I think that's important with digitalization in particular. You know, we need to get that user experience right before we can kind of open something up. I think it's very important. So we're using the year then to take the feedback on the courses themselves, the content, how they're presented. So the TUTOR project has been really good as a testing space for that. But certainly I could see it from the engagement levels that we've seen, that this could be something that could be run out nationally. And I think the key strength of it really is, like, what we've realized is that we're dealing with the same issues as in the things that we're talking about that are relevant in higher education. We're in many times we're trying to teach the students the same type of things. So isn't it great that we don't have to duplicate this across all universities and institutes, that this is something that, regardless of where you're going to third level college in Ireland, that you might have access to. And again, it's a support tool. I think that's really important to highlight, that it's a support tool for lecturers that they can use. So the idea is that it's something that they can lean on. It's not looking to replace in any way, but for different learners, people that want to learn in a different way or just need to hear things in a different way, it's really important that we offer these options.
Thanks, Aoife. As a key theme is employability, is there an intention or is there something in progress in relation to one of the digital backpack areas being that of employability?
There is, yeah. So the partners have put together proposals for different areas that they think would need, that we can put forward a course in. For example, employability is one of them that they're looking at. And they're looking at, I suppose, building on from TUTOR and that partnership space, they're looking at actually how can we develop these programs, how can we develop these courses with students at the heart of it from the start, so that the student voice is that they're actually part of the design stage, rather than kind of delivering something and saying, what you think of it now. They're looking at that partnership model and trying to bring it in earlier by bringing them into the design stage of the content. And so that's something that there'll be further development over the academic break.
Yeah, and I suppose we'll be eager and keen to say that career services obviously will have huge sort of input potentially into anything that you're developing there, or not potentially, would have huge input into that.
Yeah, they've opened
it out.
They've opened it out to different stakeholders
on that. Some nice sharing of information in relation to the UK, and you probably are aware of the advanced HE work on employability, but great to have that as a link in the chat. And then a question from Fanula, for you particularly, Niamh, you'd mentioned that idea of articulation of employability sort of skills and attributes in the curriculum as one way, but other ways in which to approach academics re-signaling employability skills within the curriculum, or any system that you use.
So yeah, thanks for that. Just firstly on the advanced HE, that's actually the definition of employability we went with was with the advanced HE. Yeah. But on the question, I suppose, trying to signal employability skills within the curriculum, I suppose what we've started to use is a self-evaluation tool, and it's in its developmental phase. But I suppose that self-developmental tool then will kind of give academics, you know, a tool for assessing, I suppose, gaps in how they address curriculum employability within their curriculum. Because again, I suppose what we don't want people to do is push employability over to work practice, work placement. We want to engage it in all modules. So I suppose we're not taking employability by itself, because again, employability can tie into sustainability, it can tie into universal design, you know, academic integrity, digital transformation, and then the equality. So the 6 themes come in. So it kind of gives an overall picture of how the integration of, I suppose, the themes and the pillars are included into the employability. And then I suppose once, if there are gaps, I suppose, looked at from that point of view, then there are kits to, and I suppose resources to help to enable that gap to be reduced, and to help lecturers and academics, you know, fill those gaps.
Great, Niamh. Actually, I see Fionnuala has her hand up, so I think she might want to maybe probe a bit deeper, Fionnuala.
Yes, if I may. Thank you very much, Niamh and Aoife. So Niamh, I'm curious to understand, within your curriculum, do you have it scaffolded such that you can pick out all the employability elements year on year on year? Like what can you see progression, and then can you see it across modules, across courses?
Yeah, so the idea, so it's actually going to be a digitized tool. So it's like a questionnaire, and we'll say the 6 themes are in there, and you click, we'll just say for argument's sake, a rating of 0 to 4, and they're explained. So then you get a digitalized, like a wheel, and it will show you the areas. So you can do that modular or program, and you can actually see the areas. It will identify the areas then that will say, if you get 2 out of employability, well, what steps can you take in your module or your program to get you from a 2 to a 4? And there's actually links then and toolkits that will actually take you and help you to develop those. And I suppose some of those tools will be, you know, from careers and, you know, external organizations that are out there, because there's great, I suppose what we've come across is there are so many best practices that are happening in isolation, and people aren't actually aware of. And I suppose that's why we're kind of capturing, you know, somebody, you know, mentioned about the framework there from Advanced HE, you know, the UK, Ireland, Europe, you know, Australia. There are great toolkits there that can be utilized. And, you know, different organizations, you know, if you're in arts or, you know, engineering or business, there are different ones that can help guide that side of it as well. So the idea is you can look at it at modular and program level as well, to figure out, you know, where the gaps are and how you push forward to reduce those gaps. And I suppose there's collaboration there with stakeholders as well, and students, so focus groups as well, you know, to see where and how students are engaging.
Thanks, Niamh, and I think we're all interested here about the digitised tool. We all have different versions of what you're talking about, I think, or attempted them. Here in DKT, we've got an embedded employability project, and we've looked at, you know, attributes in different ways. But it's the digitisation piece, because the resourcing behind that will make it easier and more trackable is an interesting development, for sure.
And you can see, you know, you can see immediately your output. So once it's there, it's in a you know, a pictorial viewpoint to you. Definitely.
I think other than that, look at it, you've shared really great wealth of information, thoughts, thought-provoking, I think, conversation afterwards, after the presentation as well. So thanks for that. We had a good attendance today, but also we have many more who will tune back on this because it's a recorded session. So when those come back, and you said you were going to share the presentation with us, and we will then be able to circulate that to our members as well. So thanks, Niamh and Aoife, for your time today and the work on the tutor.
Thanks very much,
Thanks
Catherine.
so much.
And enjoy the 10 minutes left of your lunch.